Eerie, spooky and spine-chilling. Some hits and some absolute misses. Bollywood's horror films are a journey into those territories that you weren't prepared for. With over-the-top acting and music score that hasn't been upgraded since 1965, we are clearly facing a horror film epidemic. Gone are the days of putting a family in a haunted mansion and letting a priest come and exorcise the house. Now everybody wants high concepts that don't always work. But don't worry, this is not a diss video. In fact, while we wait for a good horror film to grace Bollywood, let's take a trip down nostalgia's lane and list the top 10 horror films Bollywood has ever made. This is your ultimate guide to Hindi horror movies. So grab a pen and paper and let's dive in. When talking about Hindi cinema and horror, there is one director duo that cannot be missed. With iconic monsters and complicated timelines, the Ramsey brothers have made their mark, and how? Be it with their devil worshippers curse in Purana Mandir that haunts the royal family for generations, or the search for a lost sister that will help them unearth a treasure along with hidden evil that will terrorize them in Tehkhana. Although their budgets were low and their stories were a blend of eroticism and fear, they could deliver hits like Darwaza, where the entire plot depends on a simple door separating the evil entity from the rest of the world. Purani Haveli houses an underground monster waiting to escape so he could go on a killing spree with no end in sight. But our favorite pick from the Ramsey brother category has to be Veerana, that was released in 1988. This cult favorite has been made popular on TV for its iconic imagery and the most horrifying witch of all time. Their formula of having the same old elements repeat in their films reached its epitome in Veerana. The plot is far from simple, but it begins with a beautiful being possessed by a vengeful spirit. But as is true for all Ramsey brother films, that's just the beginning of a lot more that is to come. We go from the earliest trends of horror films in Bollywood to the latest ones. Horror comedies have taken the genre by a storm, so obviously it had to be on our list. From our desi ghostbuster twist with Phone Booth to getting a ghost married within a time crunch in Ruhi, these films are a riot of laughter while keeping you hooked to the edge of your seat. But Lakshmi showed us that not all horror comedies have to be frivolous. The ghost of a transgender managed to start a conversation within Bollywood that was clearly missing. And of course, Rohit Shetty had to jump into the bandwagon of this new trend too. He turned the fourth installment of his popular franchise Golmaal into a horror story. And to his benefit, the inherent humor of his characters lent itself to the perfect horror comedy film. But it is Stree that needs to be awarded 9th place on this list, since it is what pushed this category of horror films to its success.
अच्छा वो कजे मंत्र काम करेगा ना
90%.
90% मतलब क्या होता है
शायद 99%.
मतलब 1% चांस है कि हम शहीद हो जाएंगे.
While uncovering the mystery of the Stree in Chanderi, we are taken on a ride of a lifetime. The songs, acting and even the myth, it has managed to stand out and be amongst the funniest horror films to have existed. Can horror films really exist without anticipation? One of the best categories of horror films has to be those that feature a group of friends that get entangled with a paranormal entity. And as you know, at least one has to die and one has to survive. The rest of the film simply becomes a game of figuring out who those people are going to be. Darna Mana Hai and Darna Zaruri Hai both have an anthology of horror films within them and are tied by one larger storyline where a group of friends get stuck. As each smaller story is narrated, one by one, the group gets smaller until they have to face the ultimate evil. Kaal has the iconic stranded in a jungle trope, and Horror Story as a group of friends spend the night at a haunted hotel. Both make for promising films and deliver in their capacity. But being a cult favorite, Krishna Cottage was an obvious choice for the 8th place on our list.
Shanti!
Not only do we have a group of friends being forced to take shelter, but also take home the evil entity with them, making it an evocative and incredibly terrifying film altogether. Although a bit dated now, if you grew up with the film, chances are that your bias may make you agree. But whether you agree with this or not, monster horror is a tricky one to get right. If the CGI sticks, it can be worth every penny. But if the beast is laughable, the horror instantly turns into comedy. That's why films like Creature 3D struggled despite their ambition, while movies such as Bhedia found a balance with humor and slick visuals. But when zombies are stoned like in Go Goa Gone and a woman turns into a serpent for revenge like in Nagin, absurdity and horror become two sides of the same coin. But sometimes the scariest creatures aren't the ones built with VFX, but the ones that crawl straight out of our childhood fears. Which is why Makdi is the choice of 7th place on this list. It truly nailed the creature horror space without relying on flashy CGI. Makdi just didn't create a monster, it created a memory that will always haunt us. Magic on its own can be fascinating, but the moment it turns dark, it becomes one of the most unsettling forms of horror. Because here, the enemy isn't just a ghost or a monster, it's a human being with control over powers we can't even begin to understand. Take Fook for instance, a film that fed on our obsession with the evil eye and superstition, reminding us how easily fear can be planted in the mind. Then there's Raz 3, which threw black magic right into the glamorous world of Bollywood. Ek Thi Dayan added another layer, hiding its witch in the disguise of love and family, while Bhool Bhulaiya 2 sneaked in black magic under the guise of comedy. And yet, despite these strong contenders, we have to give 6th place to Shaitan for its banger soundtrack, emotional narrative and bold take on how far a father will go to save his daughter.
जब मैं इस गुड़िया को आग में फेंक कर भस्म कर दूंगा, तो तुम सब आग की ओर।
It's not just a film about black magic, but a film that makes you question whether the devil is out there or within us. If black magic showed us how the living could use the occult to cause harm, the next kind of horror flips the idea around, where the ones who've already died return to settle scores. Sometimes that return is gentle, almost comforting, like in Chamatkar, where the ghost isn't a source of terror at all, but needs to confront the men responsible for his death. Other times, it's tragic yet mystical, like Madhumati, where love and betrayal don't just end with death. And then there's 20 Saal Baad, whose haunting songs and shadowy corridors turn vengeance into something sinister. But ghosts aren't all the same, are they? Some forgive, some warn, and some wait in silence. But there are also those who refuse to rest until their rage has been answered. Which is why Bulbul has to make it to 5th place on our list for being the kind of film that was set against the weight of cruelty.
छोटी सी लड़की कह रही थी कि काली माँ ने मारा।
It gave us a spirit who wasn't just seeking revenge. She became the judge, jury and executioner, not just a ghost, but a goddess in her own right. What if the most harmless object in your room was the one planning your death? Sometimes horror doesn't hide in the shadows or jungles. Sometimes it's right there in plain sight. I mean, who would have thought a simple mirror could pull you into a twisted reality like it did in Dobara? Or Dibuk, where a cursed box could wreak havoc in the way it did. But the OG Papi Gudiya cannot be missed here, the iconic film that ruined dolls for us forever. Add haunted 3D to the mix and you have a creepy piano teacher soul trapped in a locket that does not let anyone sit a moment in peace. But all these objects still feel like something you could avoid. After all, you don't bring home a cursed doll or an ancient box every day. The real terror begins when the cursed object is sitting in your own living room. This very simplicity of 13B is what put it on 4th place on our list. This underrated film played out the character's life like a daily soap but with deadly consequences, proving that although objects may be lifeless, in horror films you can't even trust that. Some films don't need haunted houses or cursed dolls. All they need is a troubled mind. And suddenly, reality itself becomes the horror. Take Con for example. One room, one woman, one stranger at the door. No ghosts, no blood, no cursed mirrors, just paranoia dripping from every silence. Then there's Phobia, where the walls of a house aren't just walls anymore. They become a prison built out of the mind itself. And Game Over takes a similar approach, where trauma and survival play out like a loop you can't escape. A horror film disguised as a video game. Even a film like Karthik Calling Karthik built up the suspense like a regular thriller until its shocking twist pulled the rug out from under the audience. All of these films toy with the boundary between reality and imagination, but the one that blended it into mainstream cinema effortlessly, on 3rd place of our list, we have the crown jewel of psychological horror, Bhool Bhulaiya.
आज दुर्गाष्टमी है, तेरा गला काट के तेरा खून पीना है, तेरे मुर्दे पे मुझे ताने हैं।
The brilliance of Bhool Bhulaiya lay in this balancing act, keeping the entertainment alive with comedy and songs and creating an illusion far scarier than any spirit. But in all honesty, the scariest tales are the ones we grew up hearing, the kind whispered at night, the kind you half believe even as an adult. Films like Chori tap into the fear of unborn children being cursed, and Pari wrapped folklore in chilling imagery, turning innocence into something uncomfortably sinister. Munjia pulled a local Maharashtrian legend into the mainstream, making its tiny spirit just as unsettling as any ghost. And even Paheli, though gentler, reminded us that folklore isn't just horror. Sometimes it's just love, longing, and the supernatural woven together. But no points for guessing our pick for the 2nd place has to be something that you cannot erase from your mind so easily. Tumbbad's rain-drenched landscape turned a simple legend into a full-blown myth. It is the tale of the cursed god Hastar, whose never-ending appetite mimics human greed. Because when folklore comes alive, it isn't just a story anymore, it's a warning. And finally, a horror movie list is never complete without our classic haunted house films. The creak of an empty corridor, the locked room no one dares to open, and the sense that the walls themselves are watching you. It all began with Mahal in 1949, a story that didn't need tricks, just a mansion, a song, and the idea that some houses never let their past go. Decades later, Booth stripped away that grandeur. No mansions, no palaces, just a flat in a high-rise. And suddenly, the haunting felt closer than ever. But if Bhoot made it real, Vastu Shastra doubled down on the idea that a home is never just bricks and walls. Every doorway, every tree in the yard could become a prison for restless spirits. Ragini MMS then pushed the haunted house into modern times to prove that even in an age of cameras and technology, some things can't be explained away. But no film tied it all together quite like the one that is number 1 on our list. The kind of film that makes you look over your shoulder, turn off the lights a little faster. We are talking about none other than 1920. From the gothic mansion to candlelit corner, it's the perfect film that combines all horror components into one. It proved that Indian horror could be grand, terrifying, and unforgettable, standing shoulder to shoulder with the very best in the world. And that brings us to the end of our list of the top 10 horror films in Hindi cinema. But remember, horror doesn't really end when the credits roll. It lingers in the silence, in the shadows, and maybe even in the very room you're watching this in right now. So if you don't want to be haunted, like, share and subscribe to us right now. Don't forget to comment and let us know if we have forgotten to mention any. Until then, double check behind you, keep your eyes on the mirror and don't trust what you can't see. If you like this one, here's another video we are sure you'd enjoy. Don't stop the drama here. Ja Simran ja, click the next video.